Hello and welcome to revision tips for CIPS Level 2, Certificate in Procurement and Supply, Module 1, Introducing Procurement and Supply, Learning Outcome 4, which is to know the stages of the procurement process. So here you can see the stages in the procurement cycle. Have a think about a local business as an example and look at the stages in the procurement cycle in relation to that organisation. So let's take like a local accountancy office that needs a new supplier for paper for its office printer. Does it need monthly deliveries? Or do we decide whether to create a service for a new group of customers that they've identified? But as you can see, it all starts with the requirements determination. So we identify the need. We work out where we're going to buy it from. So the source determination and the vendor selection. We process the orders, but also monitor them to make sure they arrive on time. Goods receipt and check the quality. Verify the invoices, and finally payment. Now, sourcing process starts with the identification of need. And as we know, a need can be something that's tangible or intangible, something you can physically see and touch like a product, or something that you can't, like a service. Those needs can be urgent or for something in the future, meaning you can be reactive or even proactive. The need can be generated by internal or external customers and raised manually, electronically, or using a materials requirement planning system, an MRP system. So think about what information you need to include in a requisition. Make a list of all the things. What I'd expect you to see is the what, which is the product or the service description. The how much, which is the quantity that you need. The when, which is the date that's required. And the where, which is the delivery address. And finally, the why. Why is the need there? Why has it been identified? And the requisition should be approved or signed off by a person with authority. Procurement is responsible for ensuring that all purchases are for genuine needs, as they're ultimately responsible for the budgets. Specifications are produced for those products or services, which can be performance or conformance based. Performance specifications outlines what the product or service is to do or to achieve, leaving the suppliers to innovate on how to do it. Conformance, on the other hand, details exactly what the product or service will be made of, leaving no room for innovation. Now, who's responsible for producing the specification? Is it procurement? And if so, do they need to liaise with other people? And it will depend on the organisation you work for and what you produce. The account manager, the consumer, the quality control worker, all might be involved in the creation of a specification. But the buyer is responsible for verifying the spec and consulting with colleagues to gain clarification on the areas of doubt. Why is it so important that specifications are correct? What could happen if there are errors? Let's consider an example. A timber merchant has asked a builder to build a new warehouse for them. The specification supplied to the builder states that the warehouse should be 25 metres by 23 metres. However, there's a typo in the specification. The intended measurements were 25 metres by 32 metres. How could this affect the builder and the contract that's been agreed? For manufacturing companies, incorrect specifications can lead to goods being received that are not fit for purpose, and that could result in downtime on the shop floor, and ultimately an inability to supply its customers. For service providers, incorrect or unclear specifications can result in a misunderstanding. So, for example, unless security guards are given specific instructions about carrying out hourly patrols and checking that all windows and doors are secure, he might consider that monitoring CCTV screens is sufficient. Now, for new products and services, there might be several suppliers with the skills to deliver. Requests for quotes are sent out to suppliers to invite them to bid on a particular requirement. It will include a specification or samples, so suppliers have all the information they need. Then the supplier will send in a quotation. Procurement checks that the quotations meet all of the criteria that's been set out in the RFQ, and then assesses or evaluates the quotes. The price element of the quote should not be reviewed until the buyer is confident that the quotations are compliant. So the Carter's 10 Cs helps us to evaluate suppliers. Looking firstly at competency. Is the supplier competent in being able to deliver what we want them to do? Do they have capacity for their machinery, time and resources to supply those goods and services? Do they have commitment to supplying quality products that meet our specifications? Can be demonstrated by having an ISO 9001 accreditation. Control. Is the supplier in control of their suppliers? Will supply be continuous? Cash will look at the financial health of that supplier. Could they survive during an economic downturn? Cost looks as if the supplier is offering a fair cost, not just a good price. Consistency. Is the supplier able to deliver the same product time after time? Culture. Does the supplier's culture fit with your culture? Clean. Is the supplier green and do they do their best to be environmentally friendly? And finally, communications. Is the supplier able to communicate with the buying organisation as and when is needed? Consider whether computer systems are able to work together and are the working hours the same? Making contract award recommendations will depend on the level of authority. Some buyers can award contracts directly to their suppliers, whereas others have to make a recommendation to another individual who has the authority to make the final decision. When recommending a supplier, a buyer will summarise the results of the evaluation stage in a report that provides evidence of their recommendation. And the contract authorisation happens after the appropriate contract type has been identified and the contract has been drawn up. It needs to be authorised by someone within each organisation who has the appropriate level of authority and capacity. Once a contract is agreed and signed, the buyer can place the order. In some cases, a framework agreement is drawn up when organisations want to work together, but they're not in a position to finalise the details of the contract. A framework is not a contract. It just explains the terms that will govern the contract when it's formed. Frameworks can be one buyer, one supplier, one buyer, many suppliers, and even many buyers and many suppliers. They work like panel agreements. A call-off or a blanket order is a purchase order which enables repeated orders over a period of time. For example, an organisation that manufactures shoes could have a blanket order for the supply of shoe boxes that they call off when needed. They will have a good idea of how many they will need in a year. And the benefits of using a call-off order is that it allows the supply of materials to be secured. And that can be done over multiple delivery dates, meaning that the buying organisation doesn't have to hold excess stock. It also reduces the amount of administration required to process multiple purchase orders. The sales orders and invoice items are raised as they are needed until the point at which the contract is fulfilled. At the end of the order, it could happen when the maximum order value is reached. But the downside to the blanket order is a buyer might end up forecasting inaccurately and could face financial penalties if all stock is not called off. Or if they have to accept the products, they could end up with high levels of inventory. So the framework is not the contract, the call-off is the contract. KPIs or key performance indicators should be included in a supplier contract. Buyers monitor suppliers' performance and delivery to ensure they're in line with the KPIs. If a supplier meets their KPIs, they're likely to keep the business and have a contract renewed. If they do not meet the KPIs, the contract could be terminated before the end date or not renewed when it comes to an end. Performance can encompass elements such as quality, quantity, price, place, delivery, reflecting the 5 rights of procurement. So let's take a look at the KPIs on this slide. Deliver goods before 9 o'clock each day. Deliver 24 each day. Ensuring correct health and safety regulations are in place. And sends an invoice every Friday. Are these targets SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time-bound? Could you rewrite any that make them more improved? And is there anything that hasn't been covered within the KPIs that could be added in? Buyers need to ensure that suppliers are paid on time. If suppliers don't receive money from their customers, it could jeopardise their cash flow. And they may need to stop sending goods or providing services until the outstanding debt is repaid. Expediting is a control mechanism to ensure that an order will arrive in the right quality and packaging in accordance with the required standards at the set time. So expediters track the movement and monitor the progress of an order from receipt of order acknowledgement from suppliers through to delivery and resolve issues that may result in delays. So there are different types of expediting. You can expedite by exception. You can do it routinely or an advanced status check. Exception expediting is where the buyer only takes action when the organisation sends out a signal of material shortages. The routine one is to prevent materials and supply or quality problems, so you do it a few days before the expected delivery. And the third, advanced status check, is for critical parts, and a detailed production plan will be handed over to the buyer. And during the process, the buyer will carry out periodic checks. And then we review the outcomes. So a contract can be amended if both parties are in agreement. So for example, to revise quantities, KPIs, payment terms, or the length of contract. And often these quarterly business review meetings are held between buyers and suppliers. And problems can be raised and resolved during these meetings, and feedback can be given from both sides. But ultimately, the issues need to be addressed as soon as possible and not stored up for the meetings. So to recap, we've gone through some pre-award and post-award stages of the procurement cycle. So pre-award stages include identifying the needs, producing the specifications, requesting quotations, receiving quotations, assessing them, awarding the contract and authorising. The post-award stages of the sourcing process will include placing the orders, expediting, monitoring performance and delivery, paying suppliers and reviewing the outcomes and processes. Good contract management throughout the stages contribute to a successful relationship between the buyer and the supplying organisation. Thank you for watching.